afternoon, good evening, good morning from wherever you're dialing in. My name is Frank Sullivan. Today I'm going to be your host for the webinar. Today we're talking about optimizing your data pipelines and ETL. I'm going to introduce the topic, then the speakers, and then we're going to dive right in. So first of all, what exactly is ETL? ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. You could also do extract, load, transform. This is a framework for data movement. It is a subcomponent of data strategy and data engineering, but it's a collection of techniques that allow you to pull data out of source, whether that's Salesforce, CRM system, SAP, as an ERP store, transform the data into a common format, a data table or a data frame that is suitable to move into the next stage, and then loading it from staging into the target. ETL is often misunderstood, especially when it comes to the discussion around automated data movement versus manual ETL processes. And that tends to be a bottleneck, whether you're small or a big company. A lot of this feeds into what we call the data and AI maturity model, thinking about where you are and where you actually want to get to in terms of your organization's readiness. And of course, as we all know, if untended, the weeds overgrow. Small errors compound over time and could become big problems, not just around performance, but also around cost. I've got two fantastic speakers here to speak not only to the technical side, but also the commercial side as well, discussing the short-term challenges and the long-term challenges that we can overcome with better ETL, with better data movement, and how that can improve your overall readiness. So today we're going to talk about the maturity model. We're going to talk about how to establish a benchmark, know where you are and what you actually need to improve, a framework for execution and how that ties into use cases, and step-by-step sort of proven approach that we've had with customers of all sizes. And then we'll have a wonderful Q&A with our speakers. So my name is Frank. I'm the CMO of Cloudaeon. I'm going to be the host for today. I have the pleasure of introducing Jon Cooke, the CTO at Dataception, and a real engineer's engineer when it comes to data products, but more importantly, how to tie that back to the end user, those that are actually getting value. And my wonderful colleague, Dan Harris, the Chief Revenue Officer at Cloudaeon, and currently leading the Innovation Lab. Jon, can we get a 30-second summary? Why should we listen to you today?
Well, data integration, probably about 35 years, doing low latency stuff with in the 90s, believe it or not, on Corba and low latency messaging, PubSub, and all that sort of stuff. And it's been a major part of what I've been doing for literally my entire career. Worked in banking, also algo trading, market data. It's all about data, moving between systems and this kind of stuff. And so been doing a lot of AI, and again, that's the scale going up very high. Also going into product management as well. I've done a lot of launches around products and actual go-to-market products and all that sort of stuff. So bringing that sort of product management, that data movement and engineering is kind of the holy trinity in my mind. So yes, that's something I've been doing for a lot in my career. So hopefully I can provide some insight. So yeah, and some value.
Well, you had me at hello, Jon. And our good friend, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Jon and I were chatting before we started this session, and we realized we actually have quite a lot of crossover with our careers. I'm 3 years behind Jon in data, 27 years in this industry. Didn't realize you started in low latency, Jon. That's where I actually began doing low latency messaging system for betting and gaming companies. And it was about trying to take advantage of mobile connections at that point to get high levels of concurrency. Everything I've talked about over the last 20 years has been around how do you get value from data, and that's from direct conversations with customers, with thought leadership groups that we run through a daily executive lounge. A common question we get is, right, I've got a data team, I've got a data challenge. How do I demonstrate to the business there's going to be value from that data? That's the sort of conversation I have all the time. Customers go, right, this is awesome. They buy into a project, and then people like you, Jon, have to go and make it actually work. And there's a big difference between selling something and making it work in the real world. And hopefully our combined skills can help answer those questions today.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. And I shall be the the Michael Clayton of the data strategy world, the janitor. The smaller the mess, the easier it is to clean up. But thanks for being here today. So part one, the data and AI maturity model. Dan, I'm going to pass this one over to you to kind of explain, if we think about the two axes here, right? What is the value to the organization, and then what is its relative complexity in terms of being able to roll out and get to that point of value? Where we're starting off at level one here.
Not necessarily. So this data and AI maturity model has been around for a while, and I use it as a conversation starter. And if you look at sort of a distribution bell curve of how businesses are in terms of their data maturity, there's going to be those who are just beginning their journey and those who've already been on it for quite some time, who are already very advanced. The mantra we have at Cloudaeon is to meet the customer where they are. And it really doesn't matter where the customer is, it's all okay. We can find a way to move you forward. The way we tackle that, though, really depends on how complex is change going to be. And that can work on a number of different ways, be it technology, be it people, be it process, be it cultural, be it adoption, a number of different things you can consider that on. But most importantly, what value is it going to create for the organization? And typically, the more complex, the more value, but not always. So at level one, if people are collecting and storing data, we're in the right meeting, right? Because you've got some sort of data warehousing, you've got some sort of database, there's some application or some SaaS application that is collecting data in some way, shape, or form, and you're storing it, right? Not super advanced, not super valuable, but if you're not doing that, it's probably not the right meeting for you. As we get to the next stage, we're looking to start trying to get a bit more value from that data. So we're beginning to explore it. We're creating data marts, data cubes, we're creating some data warehousing, and we're building stuff that the business consumes, right? That's a BI report that runs every week, every month, every quarter, or it's a dashboard. And there's some level of curation happening with that data, which means it's no longer in its raw state. It's in some sort of state which is more reflective of what the business actually needs to know. As we go to the next level, it gets a bit more exciting. And I think most of our customers are probably on the cusp of level 3 when we engage with them. Not always, but most of them tend to be around sort of level 2 to level 3. And this is when we're really starting to scale out analytics across the business. We're really trying to operationalize what we're doing. So we're moving away from static reports into real-time insights. We're starting to apply DevOps principles to data. We're starting to apply more governance. We're starting to apply more lineage and starting to try and make sense of the data across multiple sources. With that comes a lot more value, but a lot more integration challenges that come with it. That's a building block that takes us to the next level, where it starts to get a lot more exciting. Huge amount of hype in the market right now around AI. This hype, as John will probably concur, has been around for more than the last couple of years for people in the industry, and people have been taking advantage of machine learning and data science models for more than the last couple of years. It did exist before ChatGPT became very popular. What we're looking to do is to build these smart data models and actually turn them into things that are beneficial for the business. And use cases here like customer churn is important, fraud detection is important, predictive maintenance is important, but it's not the top level, right? This is not telling you, it's telling you what has happened and it's giving you knowledge. It's not prescribing what you should do next. And that's the way we're heading. And that's where most organizations have their aspirations for applying AI in their business. And it's a very real chance that those companies that don't apply AI to their business may not exist in 5 to 10 years' time. It's that bigger game changer, right? It's almost as big as it was when the internet was created. So getting to the point where you can predict the future using your data sets and take action in an automated way is the end goal for many customers we speak with. Not many are there, but we work a lot with smart people who've solved big problems over the number of years, and some are. But we're trying to help a lot of companies get closer to that position in our engagements.
Just in case there are any Gen Z engineers on this call or watching this video, AI did exist before ChatGPT. I will say that. John, we've had
I did an AI module on my course in 1992, so that's just, and it existed even before that. So it has been around for a while. Obviously, what's different is the cost and scale of cloud and everything else that's made it much more applicable. I mean, your credit cards have been scored credit risk and probably the default for the last 20 years using machine learning. So yeah, it has been around. This is quite an interesting model. I think one of the things that I'm always talking about is basically the capability come on sort of the business side, people actually doing the actual use cases. So alongside each of these levels, which is a kind of sort of more of a technology lens, if you take a capability lens on that, so fundamentally being able to collect and store data in a robust way, are the business chucking around Excel spreadsheets, or are they actually do they have some kind of curation mechanism to actually be able to do that? Do they have robust, if something breaks, do they have a good escalation path and get fixes and all that type of stuff? Going up to level 2, you start to explore. So the exploration, this is obviously the technical side here, but actually, are the business actually using data? Can I go and actually find, if someone goes, right, or can I actually use a piece of data to actually drive a business decision? You know, or let's just say, like, build me a report, throw it over to the team, and that happens. You know, so there's a capability kind of maturity around that. Once you start going up, it's then really, how does this start baking into the organization? Kind of operationalized analytics. It's basically, as I say, are the business using analytics and data to run the business? Are they actually being able to actually bring stuff together themselves? Are they coming up with the new initiatives? Are they actually using decision making? And all the way up to the top, when are they actually using algorithms and algorithmic decision making to be able to actually make the decisions? Even a few years ago, I saw a company that had an AI as a model as a board member. And that was like 5 years ago. It's like that. Obviously, that's like, you know, not everyone's going to do that. And with ChatGPT and kind of generative AI, that's what we're seeing. So as you go up this curve, you have a technology maturity, but you also have an inherent sort of data and analytics, what I call a scientific capability or maturity. You know, are companies being scientific about using data into their business process? That's a really interesting lens. And then also the other thing I would say is, looking at product is trying to shrink this down. Fundamentally, you want to do these things, but what you don't want to do is actually spend, 3 months in each one of these things, right? As going through the pilot, you want to shrink them down and get it, it's iteration and get this product mentality. Can we try a new machine learning model? Do we have to go through all these steps and take weeks and weeks to do these? So trying to shrink that down, trying to get that iterative product kind of mentality into this is another key part.
Jon, are you familiar with the fundamental physics governing how matter enters a black hole?
I have a surface level knowledge, shall we say. I wouldn't say I'm not a trained physicist, but yes, I do have a surface level. Yes.
Surface level. That's a very clever joke in the context of an event horizon. You're familiar with spaghettification?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Term. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we think about an organization having one team or one department that is more mature in their capabilities, let's say they're kind of at level 4.5. They're somewhere between self-service and applied AI, and the tail end of the business is still on-prem. Let's say, how would you characterize the spaghettification of an organization in terms of organizational readiness and AI maturity?
Well, the first thing is, like I said, it's each spaghetti strand has a different density, right? So it's going to get elongated at different rates, right? Fundamentally. So to take that to sort of torture analogy even more, and you see this all the time, especially in large organizations. You get, one organization is rearing ahead to be actually build analytics and actually deploy it in the business. Other ones just want to build an Excel spreadsheet and actually run with that, right? So fundamentally, the trick is trying to get across get them across the same point, right? Try and get this spaghettification being at the same level, right? Fundamentally, and that's going to be different from businesses, and it also means sometimes the businesses are running at different rates. So I recently just work for an asset manager insurance company where the insurance business was very slow, but the asset management was faster. So actually, is there any sense in actually having them unified across the two things, because the businesses are very different? So fundamentally, for me, it's about the use cases. So if you've got a use case, a very simple prescriptive use case for maybe the insurance company to actually see kind of how many policies have been sold, that kind of stuff. The asset management wants to do some portfolio management. You actually have different approaches based on that, even inside that organization. So you do have like the elongation bit is actually going to be different and needs to be different. And again, it's about applying this levels for each of the organizations in the right way, not trying to get a kind of unified approach, but it will be very different.
I think, Jon, you've obviously been in the real world, because I've seen that exact scenario play out many times over. There are parts of the business, as you say, running at different speeds. That creates opportunities, and I think a business would be foolish not to take advantage of those opportunities. but it also creates some risks, and part of those risks impact the ability of the organization to make best use of its data across the whole business, to get that holistic view, but also to get scale, repeatability, and automation in its platforms. Some of the best organizations embrace that innovation that happens in certain departments, and they'll be okay to bring in a SaaS service or a particular product that solves a specific product-led need out of the box, right? And there are solutions that do that depending on your industry. And they let it happen, but they put in place some sort of guardrails and governance that means that that data is going to be accessible and can be analyzed and used to build models that apply to other departments. Quite often, business leaders in a department will focus on what's important to them. You know, they'll have a P&L that's relevant for them. Their bonus is tied to it. Their strategic goals and OKRs are tied to that. And they don't really have a big picture around what data strategy is happening within the business. I've seen the best organizations have really strong data leadership who have the big picture, have got plugged in to the board and are driving a strategy, but they don't stifle innovation, but they ensure that innovation grows in a way that the whole business can benefit for down the line. I don't know if you've had similar experience.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's very prevalent when you have real cross businesses or departments, you know. But like I said, that one I just talked about didn't. So it's, you only really start seeing that when you start getting things like ESG and stuff, which are genuinely cross business. You look at the supply chain across. A lot of businesses don't have that. They have that. They're quite siloed actual businesses. So having a strong leadership in there is absolutely right. But it's also important to understand the business that you're in fundamentally. You know, not trying. I've seen the other side where people try and push uniformity across where it isn't appropriate, and the business are looking, going, scratching their head, going, actually, what's going on there? So again, for me, I always come back to the product approach. You know, what's the use case? What's the business? What's the appropriateness of that? And driving that whole thing. And I think a strong data leader is great. You talked about that. I think a strong data leader actually needs to have more of a product type focus. So you see data leaders who are more about kind of the technology or more about the control, the governance, that type of stuff. But when you take a product approach, you can actually then start doing business change and become more change agents. And I think the data bit is all you know, is an important and a really important piece of that, you know, fundamentally. And obviously we'll get into kind of the later slides around innovation, how you actually drive that whole innovation with use cases and that sort of stuff, which is super important. Having that strong leadership and understanding your business and the machinations and the differences between the different businesses is really, really important.
Excellent points. And to move from the black hole metaphor that AI could be for enterprise IT spend, we're all familiar with a much easier term to understand: gravity, inertia, right? Is it even possible to skip a step on the way up to level 5 if that's the direction of travel? But something very important that we need to ask ourselves, that the audience members need to ask themselves, is where are you today? How do you know you're actually there? And where do you need to get to? Not where do you want to get to, where do you need to get to, right? There's an aspiration gap in a lot of organizations. They say we want to be decisioning, automated, AI first, remote first, whatever, right? So there's an aspiration gap. Do you really need to be all singing, all dancing in AI if it's going to fundamentally cripple the business financially, or, you know, lead to mass layoffs, or, you know, change all of the underlying structure of the value that your organization creates? Where are you today in terms of your data and AI readiness? As Jon has mentioned, from the capabilities perspective, as Dan has mentioned, from the technologies perspective, where do you actually need to get to? Do you really need to get to applied AI right now with this type of market, this type of offering, this type of organizational talent? Or could you perhaps be a bit more focused on getting to level 4? It's not to say that you shouldn't have vision, but it's an important piece to reflect on. 30 seconds in summary. Jon, how would you advise businesses on how to assess where they are today and where they need to get to? 30 seconds, please.
It comes down to the aspiration. What's the biggest value to your business process? What do you want to try out? What do you want to, what's actually going to add value to that? Say the actual business you're doing. You're absolutely right. Don't use an AI model where a metric will do, but understanding how you actually drive that business value, and having a value framework is really, really important. And then not being able to try stuff out quickly, cheaply, and low risk. That's the other side. It's about continuous improvement, continuous change, continuous trying stuff out. The innovation's got to be there. Otherwise you're going to stagnate.
Why use a spreadsheet when I could spend 20 hours automating
with
LLMs only for it to fall apart later? Dan, how do we know where we are, right? I've got one team, one department, maybe I'm not a data expert or not in the analytics team. How do I know at an organizational level where I am?
Well, it doesn't need to be at an organizational level, and it's quite often not. And as John has highlighted, this could be a different maturity score depending on the department you're in. Some will be moving faster, some will be moving slower. So there'll often be a range of maturities across an organization, depending on whether your strategy is to have uniformity. And I'm with you on this, John, that I don't think uniformity enforced without the right sort of enablement and creativity and innovation support is a good strategy. The business will be somewhere on this curve, and departments will be either higher or lower than the mean within that business. In order to do that, you've got to ask yourself some questions, and those questions tend to be tied to a value framework. Those questions need to be looking at, what do I do in terms of process today? What people do I have in my business? What technology do I have? And what value does it actually drive for me? Apologies.
Very good. We'll put AI as a black hole, sucking everyone towards it.
It is if you want to create your own LLM, that it might well be a black hole.
I think that was the thing to do 2 years ago, right? I don't think it's the thing to do anymore. So the market moves very fast, and unless you've got the ability to innovate fast and fail fast, the risk is you end up mapping out a big transformation project to get you to the level you want to get to, and by the time you actually build out your SOW and you're 6 months in, the goalposts have moved.
LLMs are so 2023. 2025 is all about quantum and robotics. Let's move on, shall we? Part 2, establishing a benchmark. To know where you actually are and to understand the practical components, we're going to focus this more on ETL. We've started with a very broad picture of understanding at the team, at the capability, at the technology level, but now let's get practical. Let's zoom in a little bit on ETL and how we're moving data around the organization. Dan, pillar number 1, performance. What does it mean, briefly?
Well, actually, there's a common theme running through all of these five pillars, and that common theme is the word metrics, right? If we don't measure something, we can't track it. So performance is going to look at, with our ETL process, our data pipeline, how well is it performing? Is it optimized? Can it be enhanced? Is it running slowly? Is it delivering what our users actually expect? So if our users expect a report to be in their inbox as a PDF on Monday morning, is it getting there? Because if it is, it's probably okay from a performance point of view. If it arrived at Saturday afternoon, does it actually move the needle on the business? It's improved performance, but does it actually add any value? Platform, ETL, actually, if we look at ETL, you explained it earlier, Frank, as being extract, transform, and load. The better businesses are probably looking at as being ELT on the ETL, and that small change in the order of those letters makes a lot of sense, right? Extract, load, and transform. You're extracting your data from source, loading onto your data platform, then you're transforming it. I think the days of running an ETL process where you have a separate transformation layer, yet you have investment in a market-leading data platform, and then you're not using it to do your transformation, make little sense to me. So platform management here talks around optimization of the platform which runs your ETL process. And a lot of people are still encumbered by legacy ETL because it's running a lot of business logic, right? It does provide those reports that turn up on time and have the information the business needs. So there's a reluctance to change BAU unless there's a compelling reason to do so. You had your hand up, Frank.
Yes, just a word of advice for our audience. If you are angling for a promotion, so you're senior, but you're not at the CDO level yet, save yourself 10 million quid and a very expensive management consultancy PowerPoint. Take this to your executive board and swap the T for the L. Mind-blowing innovation. That's CDO material. All right, moving on.
Yeah, automation efficiency, what it says on the tin, right? So how much have we actually automated this? And that could be down to building repeatable, extensible pipelines. So a lot of people will get going with pipeline. They'll code those, and coding pipelines is very, very flexible, particularly using Spark, very efficient. But it doesn't have a huge amount of extensibility, and it's not particularly user-friendly for outside of the development community who've actually coded that in Spark. So when we look at automation efficiency, we're looking really more sort of orchestration. We're looking at the efficient use of code, so we don't impact the availability of compute. So we can effectively do more with the same amount of resource we've got if we optimize our efficiency.
Is there a role for low code and the repeatability, or identifying the repeatable use cases where there's a lot of manual effort or manual ETL jobs, Dan?
I think there is. I mean, there's always a place for code, and code gives you ultimate flexibility. But a low-code approach gives you extensibility, reusability, and the reusability bit I really like, because rather than having to code the same thing another team's already coded, you can take a code snippet, you can take an element of that, and you can reuse that in your data pipeline in a drag and drop basis. One of our clients was in exactly that scenario. They were coding everything in Spark notebooks. Everything's running okay, but time to live for a new data product was about 16 weeks. Not so much the development time, but the transition from development to operational support. People couldn't understand the code base because they hadn't built it, and it was that QA and user acceptance that were delaying things. Switching that to being a low-code version shortened that time frame down to 2 weeks, and the handover between dev and production support was massively condensed, and that was the big win. The code still prevails in the business, right? And there are use cases that need to be proven out fast, and coding on Spark is a very fast way of doing so. Once you've proven that it's a beneficial process, then you can look to operationalize it using low code, and it makes it more accessible to teams who will support you downstream.
Just a simple yes or no answer from both of you, actually. Do you think that with automation platforms, low-code tools, or low-code, no-code tools, in your expert opinions, do you think that the role of the data analyst will expand and become deeper, kind of moving more into what a data engineer might do? And do you think that that's an efficiency play? Dan?
I don't think I can give that a yes or no answer. I'll give it a maybe.
Jon?
I think the role's going to change. Sorry, that's not a yes or no answer. So yes, but I think the fundamental is more of that engineering, data engineering will go into different roles fundamentally. And the analyst will be one of them. There'll be lots of other ones as well. So I think no code, like I'm all in, because we've got technology that does this. It's got to be low, because you've got to go out, and for those there are use cases when you can't just drag and drop stuff. Absolutely. But yeah, so yes. But the caveat is that it's not just the data, it's all roles. And frankly, 20 years too late. This should have happened 20 years ago, but we're doing it now. So good.
Okay, so rewind 10 years, both of you, where a slightly more pimply and skinnier version of me would come to either of you and say, please, sir, may I have your Amex in order to fund my cloud infrastructure at a 55% interest rate? Has Databricks, Snowflake, cloud data platforms, have they become the new cloud billing problem, where we used to pay for infrastructure as a service on the Amex, and then things got more sophisticated with the channel, with distribution, with resale from the hyperscalers? Do you think that we have a big problem now with managing the cost of querying, or the cost of processing data, not just storing it? Dan, introduce us to cost management and FinOps here.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's $1 billion industry already to do optimization of cloud spend. Everybody loves the elasticity and flexibility of compute on demand, until somebody leaves the process running and they get a big bill at the end of the month, at which point everybody's like, turn everything off that's not actually critical. But you've got no way of knowing what is actually critical. So cost management needs to be at the heart of any cloud strategy to make it efficient. Writing good code has got to be part of that strategy as well. Otherwise, you're going to have inefficiencies and you won't be able to use the capacity. The dichotomy is that all of these cloud platforms, they are charging by consumption. They want you to use their platform as much as possible so they can charge you more money. And all the companies I work with make an estimation of what they're going to spend in the coming 12 months, and they buy into a plan at that level. If they fall short of that, there are often penalties that are applied by their cloud provider for underutilizing that demand. So they often then trying to find other workloads. And I think we've actually risk of creating the overcapacity problems we used to have, what I used to call the grand national scenario. For those of you in the UK, there's a horse race every year that everybody bets on. It's the only horse race that everybody bets on. On that one day in a pre-cloud world, if you're a betting company, you had to have the biggest server available because you didn't want the brand reputational damage of that server falling over and you being unable to take a bet. In a cloud world, you don't need to do that. You can simply scale up on demand. And that's when cost management should really become much more effective on the cloud to account for those scenarios where you need capacity, but you don't need it the rest of the year. You need it in one particular peak.
Jon.
So it's really fascinating seeing the cost and risk going from running data centers and infrastructure teams into being able to build cloud efficient applications. Fundamentally, this is what it is. And what's really interesting is the vendor space has really grown into, exactly as Dan exactly says, it's basically all the vendors want you to do, because it's all pay as you go, it's all consumption based pricing. Writing efficient code, again, what Dan says is absolutely right, is really hard. I remember we were working at Databricks, we spent a lot of time trying to do forecasting on load, which is really, unless you understand how your pipelines and your demand and all that sort of stuff happens, is very difficult. A lot of times, especially with batch and this kind of stuff, you're only using it once a day, but that might take 4 hours, right? So it's a different kind of model. Where you go back 10 years ago, you'd have on-prem and you'd buy your servers, you'd have to spend 18 months procuring them, and they'll cost a fortune and stuff, but there'll be sunk cost, and you can actually, doesn't matter how bad your code's written, that's what your server's got, it's what you get the server's got. But on the new model, it's being able to actually to understand the cost. And interesting enough, if you've got full 24-hour system going on, your cloud cost could actually be higher than actually would be if you bought the server and what. So you are starting to see some, again, in the data world, it's slightly different. In the transactional side of the fence, you are starting to see people come back off the cloud fundamentally. So understanding what your workloads are, understanding what your patterns are, understanding what your usage times, all that sort of stuff, which is FinOps. And also the other thing is, like, you see lots of these sort of modern data stack. You've got 5 or 6 different tools. I think again you did it, Dan. It's like you're paying charges for every single one of them. I see a certain ETL provider is now charging, doing monthly active rows, and it makes copies of data and stuff, and just to do the integration, right? And that's going to increase. So I do think it's been really conscious of basically understanding your load, understanding your cost profile, and not seeing the cloud being this kind of panacea for everything.
Unlike Cadbury's, this is not a circumstance where you can keep the price the same but just reduce the amount of chocolate bar the consumer gets, right? That's never going to happen. It is only through efficiencies in the refinery process, right? ETL or ELT, once you get into the nuts and bolts, where you look at, do I have cloud native applications, or have I written cloud native code that can run on the environment, on the cluster, that is efficient, I suppose. And this kind of brings us on to point number 5, which is, data quality. I think a lot of people obsess over data quality, but they don't really think about relative data quality, or they don't really think about the relativity of the data needed for that use case. Does it need to be, highly enriched weapons grade uranium, or can you just stick some biodiesel in from potato skins, right? Dan, what is important about benchmarking yourself for data quality and compliance?
I think it's a point Jon made earlier about getting a product mindset, right? And I think people when think about data quality and compliance, they think about data governance, and data governance is like that potato in the business that nobody really wants to hold on to, so they give it to the CDO, right? It's like they do data, they can do governance. I don't see a lot of governance projects getting funded outside of financial services and healthcare. And it tends to be, am I compliant with my regulator? and you do a project like that. That's not the value. And I think, John, if I understood your point correctly, having a product mindset is thinking, right, how am I going to use that data? Can I enrich it? Can I create the right lineage? Can I catalog it in a way that will be useful down the line for creating a data product, which is valuable for my business? And I think that's where I look at it from a benchmark perspective.
Yeah, so I don't like the word data quality. I think it's a misnomer. It's not quality. There's no measure of quality. That kind of. I use two terms: data applicability, which is exactly what you just said, Dan, about the use cases, and data friction. Data applicability, can't even say it, is basically you might have a data set that's got one missing column, which is fine for one use case and not fine for the other. Does that data set have low data quality? Of course it doesn't. So I think it's about that data applicability. The data quality rules or the data applicability rules, which are really validation rules for that use case, need to be applied at the use case level. That's basically the product mindset. We got this data. If you want to put some rules on it to actually see if it's good enough to what you want to use it, then put the rules on it as part of that use case. What we see in a lot of data platforms and kind of stuff on data governance, exactly as you said, that we're trying to come up with this measure of data quality. It's irrelevant. There's no such thing as a measure of data quality because it's down to how the business uses the data fundamentally. And having central teams and central governance process trying to data quality is the wrong mindset. If you take a product mindset, then data quality rules are for that use case are packaged with the same thing. And on the flip side of that, data friction. How much cost, risk, and time does it take to make the data useful for a particular use case? And that is a cost benefit thing. And that's something that really doesn't get talked about a lot in the data quality, data governance realm. That's what it comes down to: who pays for it and how much is it going to cost? Is it, so for instance, one use case, we've got a client who's got a 100-year-old business. They've got people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. When they were onboarded 50 years ago, they didn't need required date of birth fundamentally. There's 100,000 of them, the 4 million customer base. And for the operational side of the business, that works fine. But for marketing, want to go and target these people. They've got 100,000 people in their set. They haven't got date of birth. Is that data quality error? No, it's not. It's basically a applicability error. If marketing want to go and target those people, they're going to have to pay, either doing surveys or whatever, to actually augment that data. And that's a cost benefit around that particular use case. And are they going to getting enough revenue back from that to do that or not? That's up to them. And this is the way I always try and couch data quality and stuff. And then obviously the compliance bit is basically, are you going to get fined from the regulator fundamentally? Are you, again, to Dan's point, that's a cost benefit thing fundamentally, and a risk assessment needs to be done around it and that sort of stuff. This is the product mindset around that particular pillar.
I'm really sorry, John, but I'm feeling a little bit triggered right now whenever we talk about targeting ICPs and marketing use cases in front of Dan. I get a little bit sweaty. All right, so we've talked this through. Let's talk about the framework for execution. Right, this is the slide that you should all screenshot and steal for yourselves because it's gold. And I think I absolutely call out Dan and Raj and the Innovation Lab team for coming up with this, because it's quite good. Simple, it's elegant, and it's effective. How do you act on the benchmark, right? So road meets rubber here. Let's talk about the use cases and then we'll get into the methodology. John, 30 seconds. What is the data product mindset and why is it the starting point for all of this?
Again, like all I've talked about before, on this session. So is the data good enough for what I want to use it for fundamentally? Am I going a product? Do I have business use cases? Do I have business users? Can I drive real revenue? Can I drive real value from it? It's the end-to-end process of doing that fundamentally. And data is one part of it, obviously analytics, capability, and that kind of stuff. But it's the end-to-end driving of real business change and business process that's the product mindset. And data is obviously a key part of that, but it's only one aspect.
Let me just pause us here. I've seen someone raise their hand. If you want to use the chat box to put your question in, then we can keep it interactive. Sorry to cut you off there, John.
That was my 30 seconds.
Yeah. Dan, 30 seconds to you. How do we go from adopting this data product mindset, knowing that we've done the benchmark, we're getting into the right frame of mind? How does this move us towards prescriptive analytics? What is prescriptive analytics?
I think we got to look at it like the first step back. We're trying to make sure we're solving a business problem, right? Because chucking technology, people, process at a data problem that we think is important, and it's not important to business, just won't go anywhere. It'll never get adopted. It'll never be accepted. It will never get funded. if we can look at prescriptive analytics as a way of figuring out what's going to happen next based on what's happened before, we need to make sure that we are answering some sort of business problem. So I think for any of these projects, we've got to figure out who's our client. As data professionals, who is our client, who's going to be beneficial from this data product that we create, and what would be useful for them. And that begins by having a conversation about, you know, what people are struggling to do today, what they'd like to be able to do tomorrow, and then figuring out how data can enable that.
I think, you know, describing what has happened in the past, it's descriptive. Knowing why things happened in the past, this is diagnostic. Knowing what could happen in the future is predictive. And then getting to this gold standard, Dan, like you said, around being able to say, okay, if that happens, what do we do about it? And that kind of moves us into a really, really interesting.
Just actually, one point to make on that though is trust. People have got to trust a prescribed analytics solution. Was a little period of time 5-6 years ago where there were a number of ML models appearing that were black boxes, and they were quick solutions for a lot of business users who wanted to move fast, but they weren't easily understood by data science team who were training models and working with lots of data sets. And as a result, there was a disconnect between a business application and data science team trying to use this. If they didn't actually understand how the model was built and how its answer or its prescription was reached, it didn't get adopted because people didn't trust it. And I've seen this happen with models that have actually been very well validated, where the output has been counterintuitive to what a leader in that business area expected it to be, and as a result has said, no, I'm not using that, I'm going to go with what I feel. And that sort of relying on gut feel rather than data-driven decisions, it still occurs. So trust is a really important thing to include in this.
Yeah, I mean, on the other side of that, we're talking about the capabilities of having the businesses buy into algorithmic decision making fundamentally. Do they trust models generally to do that? And you're exactly right. That's a big cultural piece, right? You talk about data literacy and stuff, which, you know, I'm not a fan of that term, but that's exactly what it is. Do you have business people who can say, well, I can make more money, I can save costs, I can do this by using algorithms to do this? And sort of manufacturing stuff, you see a lot of this, you know, the production line. If we make the production line a bit more efficient, we'll get a machine learning algorithm to do that. And I can see the route to that. But in a lot of other business, you don't see that. It's very much, you say, gut feel, or my relationship with my customers. I don't care what the you know, your world, Frank, what the telemetry around what the customers are saying about us. I've got my customers and I've got my relationship, and that's more important than actually what they're saying. So again, that literacy piece is super important. I mean, one of the things we have is something called the data product pyramid, which is actually about driving that whole conversation where you start with a decision. So you don't start with the data, you don't start with the metric, the one to the bottom. You say, actually, what's the decision you want to make? Because so many times I get drawn into a conversation. Oh, we want to build a dashboard. Give me some KPIs. Give me some prescriptive metrics. It's like, well, actually, what decision do you want to make? And once you start driving that conversation with the businesses, suddenly things start opening up. Sometimes it stalls because you, like exactly what Dan says, like, actually, oh god, this is getting to be more scientific, and that's going to shine a big light on my gut feel type stuff. But that is part of the whole decisioning process around that. And again, product mindset around it comes into it, because you're driving real business value. If you start with product mindset, you start with business value. You don't start with tech. You don't start with you know, the thing you're building. You're still starting with the actual opportunity that you're trying to get to. So the pyramid we run through that process. What's the decision? What do you need to make that decision? Basically, exactly as you put through it. You know, give me what forecast, what metrics do I need, what data do I need? But it's a laddering effect. But you start with the actual decision. And
this is a prime piece of intellectual property and research, John, for your work that you've developed over the years. How can people access the pyramid?
So I mean, we've got material on dataception.com. We've got a whole post on that. You obviously LinkedIn. I post a lot around that, especially using AI products. Obviously, contact me as well around that, and we can talk through the process that we've done a lot of times with a lot of customers. So there's quite a few channels we can get that information. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, John. We'll share a link to your research at the end of the call. To both of you, but starting with Dan, we've talked about the change in mindset and the culture. So how do I start with the outcome, start with the why, think about the design and how we get to value. That's the product design skills, it's the product management capabilities, it's the data product mindset. We've talked about prescriptive analytics and the importance of being able to trust what things spit out. We don't really have time to get into explainable AI, but that'll probably be another topic. We've highlighted the importance of, understanding what workflows can be automated. We've talked about things that are very technical, like optimization of a supply chain manufacturing process. But we haven't really talked so much about the people side. I mean, there are obviously things that you can do at scale with sentiment analysis and, text mining. And that can then feed into how you change customer service workflows. But all of this is still kind of, can you see ways of working? You can see the full script, the full slide, or it's blocked by my camera?
No, I can see ways of working.
Okay, so knowing that we go through those 3 steps after we've done the benchmark, how does this really improve ways of working? Dan, 60 seconds, please.
But I think we've got to look at whether what we've set out to achieve at the beginning is actually being delivered. Because if we have begun with a business problem and are working on a way to solve it and defining how value that's going to be, and then working out how we're going to incorporate that into a repeatable process, if that is actually done a good job, it will change the ways we work, right? There will be a need to close a skills gap. So you may not have people on your team today who can do all of these things for you. You may need to hire people. You may need to work with a third party, or you may find some ways to do it internally by retraining people. But success will be judged by a change in the way that people work. It doesn't change the way everybody works. I mean, we do it from an ERP perspective, right? We don't really want to change the way that an SAP data analyst deals with SAP systems that have been around since the 70s. Their job shouldn't change. We want to make sure that people who make decisions based on that ERP data have the most up-to-date information. And they need to have a dashboard that's populated with that data in real time. So the decisioning, the ways of working, all changes behind the scenes. It becomes a data engineering challenge to get the data from the source system without changing a way of working into a dashboard where somebody can make a decision on it in real time. That is a successful project. And I think that's the lens looking at this through.
Very astute points. But we're talking about change management and talking about, the impact of change relative to what you set out to achieve is important. But a lot of digital transformation projects fail. A lot of jobs are cut during uncertain periods and during transitions. Not all change is progress. Let's say that you have all of the data presented to you as to why your tax policies are wrong and have unnecessarily impacted family-owned farms in the UK. Too soon? Not all change is progress. Jon.
So for me, one of the biggest impact things I can see, and it's also the hardest thing to do, is an organization's ability to make bets, fundamentally. As the industry changes, as the market changes, as the governments and world events change, the ability for a business to react to that quickly, cheaply, and with low risk is a massive capability that most businesses can't do, right, fundamentally. And this whole line you've got here, the ways of working, that ability to say, right, something's happening. Do we understand what's happening? Let's try something out without changing the whole organization, but the big digital transformation programs, all this kind of stuff. Can we try it out? Can we do it almost like a digital twin of our idea? Try it out quickly, cheaply, and low cost. And if it works, is it easy then to try and then we can move the oil tanker around? But can we try that out first of all? What typically happens is a big idea comes in, big, 100 million transformation program, 3-year program gets spun up, the whole thing the market moves on, the whole thing falls in a heap. But if you could try that out to start with, and then do we have the data for it? No, we don't have the data for it. Right, that needs the cost benefit analysis to be able to actually get that in. Do we have the capability for it? No, we haven't got the capability for it. Do we is a hypothesis right? No, it's not right. Oh, fantastic. If we can try that out in like matters of weeks, ideally, weeks, if not months, without committing large amounts of spend and without breaking the organization, and then being able to roll it out to the production side of it, even to the SAP world and the ERP world, which we know is hugely problematic to do that, that to me is the way the cultural change, the ways of working most companies need to do. As we said, AI is now becoming a massive disruptor. The companies that won't change, can't change quickly enough, are going to die, going to atrophy and die. So for me, the way that companies actually reorientate themselves to be able to do that is absolutely key, and that cuts through right through the middle of this.
Ways of working, new operating model, new capabilities, it all originates. But I think the thing that I'm picking up from the conversation, John, from your side, is experimentation, right? What Dan is saying is, when you have trust in the workflow and the underlying principles that govern how you make decisions, you can trust the automations and bring it into further scale. But I also think that it's very important to reflect on your point that where there is a lot of failure and where there is a lot of disruption, certainly where AI is coming, it's already here for a lot of us. And this is why, for the farmers of, no, I won't go down that route. Ways of working encompasses not just you did it 100% this way yesterday and it's going to be 100% different tomorrow. This is about experimentation. It's about being able to leverage a new set of capabilities and prepare yourself. This is not your boss's responsibility to get you ready for AI. They're going to try, but things will be much better for you at the individualistic level if you take the initiative to say, well, I'm gonna come 10%, and they can bring the other 90% in terms of ways of working. That's the progress, not change for change's sake. So
getting business agility fundamentally. So how do we get to that business, the agile nature of business, or agile enough, should we say? Not all businesses need to be totally agile, but the agile enough.
It would be remiss of me not to come back to the benchmark, because I think this is the starting point. Like, you don't get into the product mindset until you've done the benchmark and figured out what you actually need to solve. Dan, can you give us 60 seconds and explain why the Innovation Lab has come up with this particular scoring approach? Like, you've got the 5 pillars, which you already explained. You've got 5 points assigned to each point. Run us through briefly what these kind of observations are, how you go from the focus area to the observation to getting a score, and then getting to the action plan. Can you?
So this is the process of engagement with stakeholders who've begun to recognize that the business needs to adapt the way it's working, and make better use of data and AI, because of, as John says, if those who don't adapt fast enough are going to find themselves in some very, very lean times very quickly compared to those who do. So the idea is we take a benchmarking approach by doing a series of stakeholder interviews in about 4 or 5 different areas, and we're looking to score against the gold standard of that company who's really advanced on the maturity model we shared earlier, and the 5 is going to be the gold standard there. We're then going to rank your business based on the outputs you give us for those questions to find out where you are, and we're looking to find out where are the gaps, right? And it's not uncommon to find an organization is actually quite good in a couple of areas. Now they're 4 and 5s already, but then they find the gaps are 1s and 2s in other areas. We then look at those thinking, okay, are there use cases tied to those benchmarks that would actually be value additive to the business, that would actually contribute towards strategic goals? Would it give one of 3 metrics? And it's a sort of C-cube model. Does it give more capacity? Does it give more capability? Is it more cost efficient? Right? Because if we can achieve any of those three things, we're contributing towards why business is in business, to make money, to pay more to its shareholders. And if we can figure out that gap is worth closing, we can then rank it onto a complexity model, looking at, okay, complexity versus value. The further it is to the left and the higher it is, the better that use case is, because it's low complexity, means we can deliver it fast, and it's high value. And I'd always advocate people to start with the quickest win we can get, right? The idea is we're trying to prove that an innovation can be valuable to a business, and to do that quickly. So I'm with you, John, and I think it was a beautiful segue to what we do at the Innovation Lab. Experimentation is fine, right? Failure is fine when you're experimenting, right? What's not fine is committing to a strategy, spending 3 years and then failing, because at that point you've got a huge amount of sunk costs. You've lost 3 years of advantage going forward your business, and there's going to be some very tough decisions for the business to make at the end of that period. If you can fail fast in 30 days, you can be a lot more agile, and that agility can drive a lot more innovation in the business.
Thank you, Dan. So understanding performance, availability, scalability, where performance is degrading, uptime and availability, platform management, where you're looking at, again, the performance of the queries. We talked about the efficiency of code and how to improve that. Cost management, we've spoken in some detail about your purchasing model, some of the risks to look out for when you're buying per usage or using consumption-based pricing, and how to forecast that. It comes down to better budgeting. We've talked about automation and efficiency. We've talked about the relative importance of time and speed. As Dan mentioned, if it was due on a Monday and it comes in on a Tuesday, if maybe it's a 100% accurate report, but it's not an efficient way, it didn't meet the brief. And then, of course, talking about data quality, or Jon had a very specific term for it, applicability and compliance, where you're thinking about the environment in which this data has been formed, whether it's fit for purpose, and how you're actually handling errors. So very briefly, just Dan, run us through the Innovation Lab approach. Like, we'll do a Q&A, and if it's okay, we'll keep the session open for another couple of minutes. But Dan, run us through the Innovation Lab approach, and then we'll show where the technical resources are.
Yeah, so the Innovation Lab is it's really a vehicle for companies to use to have that environment to experiment with data hypothesis. Data as a domain is very broad. So we break the Innovation Lab down into particular areas so we can make them short engagements that allow companies to invest pretty much $0. They have to invest some time, but we're focused on delivering an output tied to a business outcome. So we spend the first couple of weeks understanding, where may there be opportunities be, reviewing with them the benchmarks, looking at those gaps, and then mapping out where the use cases could be. At the end of that ideation phase, we build out a scope for an MVP. And then as we've got that MVP scope, the next 4 weeks I'll spend actually building a working prototype that proves or disproves the hypothesis that we had around data, and in this case, around performance for ETL. At the end of that, we share our workings, right? So you get a full technical architecture of how we've done what we've done. So we share our homework with you. You then have a decision to say, right, this is something which I think could scale in my organization. It's going to require some more investment to go and do that. So we'll give you some cost-benefit analysis to figure out whether this is worth funding, what we think we could save you, because that's usually a good place to start for a first project, what we think we could make you going forward. Can we impact capability, capacity, cost efficiency? And then you have the choice to go forward and say, look, this has been great. Thank you, Cloudaeon. We'll take it from here. We'd hope you would stay with us, and we would then work with you on delivering a pilot rollout. Or what a lot of organizations do is they RFP it, right? And they say, right, I've got a problem. I've defined it. I know our prototype works. I now want to scale to my business. Let's go to market and find the right person to partner with for the long term.
Thank you, Dan. We will keep this open for a little while if I can thank our incredible brains here. If you were expecting more technical guidance on the optimization of ETL, don't worry. Scan the QR code down here. We have a white paper, and we've got 3 guides, top ETL tools in the market, being able to assess clearly what framework for data movement is right for you. We've got a really good guide on the medallion architecture, also the strengths and weaknesses of how it compares to some other architectures. It's not right for everybody, but it is a very good starting point. And then finally, understanding ETL for Databricks, how you can reduce data errors, how you can improve execution times, and really how you can optimize your costs, taking a FinOps approach to data in the same way we used to take FinOps approaches towards cloud. So scan that QR code. But now I'd like to open up the floor. In the chat box, if you have some questions, pop them in there. I see we've got our first one. Stephen, thank you very much for the compliment. Stephen Taylor Thanks you, John and Dan. We will send a copy of the slides and the recording afterwards.